Hello, this is David. Let's take a look at the first chapter in the textbook by Andrew Ng, Asset Management, A Systematic Approach to Factor Investing. And the first chapter that's assigned here in topic 8 is Factor Theory, so that's chapter 6. I think this is an excellent book. I really do. And although this chapter 6 is a theoretical setup for some of the chapters that follow later with a little more data and color. So if this feels a little theoretical, well, that's because it's called factor theory. And we can have some learning objectives that the good news is there's a high overlap here with learning objectives that will be familiar to you from topic 1, capital asset pricing model. We saw that with the authors Bodie and Noel Emick in particular, and the risk-adjusted performance measures, which in part are based on CAPM. So CAPM will be familiar, although I will say Andrew Ng goes deeper on the theory in some respects. But mostly it'll be familiar. Our first learning objective asks us to provide examples of factors that impact asset prices and explain the theory of factor risk premiums. He says that one of the primary factors is the market, specifically the market's return in excess of the risk-free rate. So that's definitely familiar from capital asset pricing model. That is the excess market return. I sometimes fall into calling this the equity risk premium, ERP, and you'll sometimes also hear it referred to as the market risk premium because the total market is much broader than just equities. But excess market return is a good example of a factor. You just need to keep in mind here, what do we mean by the market? Do we just mean equities? Do we mean all of the tradable market? Or really, in theory, do we mean all tradable assets? If we take it out in the theoretical extreme, it really includes human capital as well, for example. Then investment, we have investment style factors where value is a factor, low volatility factor, and momentum is a factor. And I think, according to some research, momentum is the best performing factor, actually. And then we have macroeconomic factors. So, for example, inflation, economic growth, and interest rates. Although I did tease these three out here, just to make a note that Andrew Ng, who again I'm gonna say is a very legitimate author and trusted author, an excellent book. So, just speaking for myself, I value a lot of what's in this book because it's well researched. He asserts that the three most important macroeconomic factors are these: economic growth, inflation, and volatility. Okay, so factor theory. Well, I pulled this quote out because there's a nice description there about a nice analogy, I probably should say. Factors are to assets what nutrients are to food. So I think that's kind of a neat metaphor, and a key idea here is that factors are not assets, and we want to move beyond asset labels. So 3 subpoints. He's saying that it's factors that matter, not the asset labels that we traditionally think about when we think about asset allocation. Second, assets are bundles of factors. And the analogy here is just as a food or a meal is a bundle of different nutrients. And I forgot the analogy on the first one, but it's that the factors matter, not assets. The analogy there is that it's the nutrients that matter more than the external label. And then we have here it's not just the meal. A meal is more than just a single asset class, so to speak. It's a bundle of nutrients or bundle of factors. And then the third point is that different investors need different risk factors, and the analogy there is different people have different nutritional needs. So, but here's the key difference, and that we're getting very close here to really summarizing the key idea in factor theory. I've studied these chapters carefully, so I'm pretty confident, and I can tell you what I'm pretty confident what the headline idea here is, and we're getting really close to it here. But this is why I highlighted this. However, there is one difference between factors and nutrients. Nutrients are inherently good for you. Factor risks are bad. We are rewarded with risk premiums by enduring these bad experiences. So here I really highlighted this because now this is, in my opinion, the headline for the chapter that introduces factor theory. Each different factor defines a different set of bad times. The key phrase that is throughout this chapter and throughout the book is bad times. That's really what I want you to take away, and we're going to see more about that mathematically soon. Bad times. So here's the three ideas elaborated. I've already discussed those. We just have those on the slide. Theory of factor risk premiums. Each factor poses a risk to asset prices. The risks inherent in all such factors are reflected as asset risk premiums. So that's the idea here about bad times. The factor is a risk, and the risk, the compensation for that risk is the asset risk premium. We're asked to describe the capital asset pricing model, including its assumptions, and explain how factor risk is addressed in the capital asset pricing model. So much of this introduction should be familiar. The capital asset pricing model is built on a theory of diversification and mean variance utility. When assets are not perfectly correlated, diversification improves the investor's risk-return trade-off. Under the capital asset pricing model, the most diversified portfolio is the market portfolio. So the thing about the capital asset pricing model, hopefully you recall, is that it's a single factor model. It's very simplistic that way. I don't think most people think that there's only a single factor, but there's an elegance to this, and it may be the most important factor. But the single factor is identified with the market portfolio and the excess market return, and we call that systematic risk, where beta, that's beta of the security or portfolio or asset with respect to that single factor, the market risk